Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Margaret. I'm in the Department of Medicine. I'm also the co-chair of the Pan-Asian Staff Association. And really, I'm just going to be here and say thank you so much for reflection and discussion. I learned so much from everyone, and we hope that you learned something insightful from your table conversations, too. So now I would like to invite Joanne Engler up to the stage. Woo! She's going to have us all start she's going to have a conversation with us regarding the demographics and multiple identities of students, Asian, Pacific Islander, and Middle Eastern descent. Thank you, friend. Thank you for speaking.
Hold on a second here. There should be a laptop here, sorry. Huh? I don't, hold on, I can't see. No. I was told there was gonna be one here. Yeah, I think so. Well, then, bathroom break? Yes, bathroom break, and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Water break, coffee break, stretch break. It is in the folder. Yeah.
Where's it underneath?
The all presentations folder. Or the, yeah.
Oh, that.
Okay. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for your patience. Gonna figure out some of those technical issues. What's a symposium or a conference without technical difficulties, right? All right, so I just want to say thank you, everyone, for choosing to be here today. My name is Joanne. My pronouns are she, her, hers. As alum and a staff member of UCSD, it means a lot to see everyone here today. And so I wanted to start by expressing my gratitude and for sharing this day with me and just being in community. It really means a lot. All right, so yesterday, Brian and Andrew gave us an introduction of some of the numbers of our international and our domestic APIMED students. And the purpose of this session, this presentation, is to look more at that disaggregated data and who makes up our domestic Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Middle Eastern students. Like when we say that we support our APIMED students, who exactly are we talking about? All right, so we're gonna start with some terms and labels, and then we'll look at data, we'll look at numbers, so get excited. And then we'll go over some survey responses from a survey that was distributed from the APIMED Programs and Services Office. All right. So before I go into the numbers and the data, it did feel like it was important to talk about how and why we have that disaggregated data that we do. And there will be some discussion questions throughout today, or not today, the next like hour-ish. So please get comfortable with the people around you. Or, you know, if you want to move tables, now's the time. Or there will be opportunity to get up and meet new people throughout this session. So get ready to make some friends also. All right. So in the spring of 2007, students at UCLA started what was called the Count Me In campaign. And these students are part of the Asian Pacific Coalition, which was a group consisting of 21 Asian American Pacific Islander student organizations. And as has been mentioned yesterday and today, there's incredible diversity within the Asian American Pacific Islander group. Different languages, customs, immigration histories, histories of colonization. But our AAPI students often get lumped into like one group, right? And often tend to be viewed and treated as a monolith. And so this campaign that the students created had three main goals. So it was to enhance the UC admission policy to include data collection on students of Bangladeshi, Cambodian, Hmong, Indonesian, Laotian, Malaysian, Pakistani, Sri Lankan, Taiwanese, and Thai backgrounds, which were at the time not included as individual ethnic subgroups on the UC application. And the second was to separate Pacific Islander into a new racial category within admissions. And then the third was to provide financial support for outreach projects that specifically targeted API groups facing severe educational inequity. And so this call to disaggregate data and add more API ethnic groups was an effort to better address the diverse needs and challenges of the various Asian subgroups that were consistently overlooked at that time and even today, as some of us can argue. And so in November of 2007, the UC system disaggregated the Asian American Pacific Islander category on its application, and it now includes 23 options for Asian American Pacific Islander students to choose from. So SWANA, that's been a term that's been thrown around, is another term that is on the UC application. And SWANA stands for Southwest Asian and North African, and describes the Southwest Asian and North African region in geographic terms. And so for some individuals or some groups, SWANA may be a more preferred term over Middle Eastern, because Middle Eastern is a term that was created by the West to racialize Middle Eastern groups, as Provost Wayne mentioned yesterday. And I recognize, that when we use the term APIMED or APIMEDA, we talk about our APIMEDA program, services office, and we talk about APIMEDA students, that acronym does include Middle Eastern in the name, and that's because APIMEDA was the term that was coined by the Coalition for Critical Asian American Studies, which was the coalition that advocated for the increase in API faculty. It advocated for the creation of an APIMEDA Resource Center. It is the reason when we have Wendy Sasaki in our role. It is the reason we have Brian in his role today. So with any umbrella term that is used to generally refer to students of different ethnic groups, there will be students who identify with it, there will be students who may not, and I think that's important to keep in mind as we continue to learn, as we continue to figure out how we can best support our students of this community. All right, so going back to the term SWANA, so in the US, people of SWANA descent are legally classified as white for racial identification purposes. And up until 2013, students of SWANA descent were reported as white in the UC system. And so in 2012, students at Berkeley, right, students are the ones like advocating for these changes on our campuses. So students at Berkeley proposed that the UC system create new checkbox on the UC application to better account for the students who are of SWANA descent in hopes to, for the community to be better represented and better accounted for in the UC data. And so SWANA became part of the ethnicity portion of the UC application in fall of 2013 and included 34 subgroups for students to choose from, and it eliminated Middle Eastern and North African subcategories, which were previously listed under white and Caucasian on the UC application. All right, so, does this work? No, that's okay. Okay, it was gonna be on the slide, but it ain't working. But if you take maybe we'll take like a minute or two. We talk about APIMED students, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, or SWANA students. There's a lot of ethnic groups that fall under that category. So if you want to take a minute, what was originally intended was to see how many we can name as a group and have that on the slide, but it doesn't seem like that's working for me today. So if you, on your phone or on your laptop or on your, like on a sheet of paper, if you want to take like a minute to write down as many ethnic groups that fall under the APIMED group, and then I'll go over the subgroups that are listed on the UC application. Did those instructions make sense? Oh, I appreciate the feedback. 1 minute. It can be an individual or group activity, whatever you are comfortable with. All right, maybe like 30 more seconds. All right, I'm hearing things quiet down a little bit, so we're gonna go on to the next slide. So these are, there are 17 subgroups under Asian American. We have 6 subgroups under Pacific Islander and 34 under SWANA. How did people do? Pretty okay? Luckily, this is not a test, so it's the summer. We're just taking a break from all that. So to be honest, I don't remember how many checkboxes there were when I applied to the UC system. I'm going to go on a limb and say this is better than what I had when I was applying. But of course, there's always room for improvement. Since these are checkboxes on the application, like for example, we see other Asian, other Pacific Islander, other North African, other Southwest Asian. we don't know, since these are just checkboxes on an application, we don't know who makes up those groups. If a student chooses to check, let's say like other Asian and Armenian, we don't know why they chose other Asian, right? We just know that they selected that, and those numbers will be reported in the data. And depending on the students, some may feel like other Asian is a good representation or a good enough checkbox. Other students may feel like, they chose other Asian because there was nothing else here that represented who they were, and that may also feel othering. So as I said, there's, even though this is better than what we've had before, I think there's definitely things that there's still room for improvement with this data. And so one thing I do want to mention is students can select multiple subgroups, multiple checkboxes on their application, and depending how that data is pulled, they may still be counted as part of only one group or part of all the groups that they select. So for example, if a student selects, Laotian and Egyptian, on one data set, they may be only counted as Egyptian, despite the fact that they selected, two subgroups. On another data set, they may count as Laotian and Egyptian, and so they'll be counted multiple times, which will also skew the numbers. And so the data doesn't accurately capture students who may identify with more than one race or ethnic group, and with just checkboxes, there is, also want to acknowledge that there is information that we may not be accurately capturing. So what do we lose, when that data is not accurately reflective of the students that are at our institution? Group questions. All right, so at your table, or if you feel the need to get up and stretch and move your legs, or if your Apple Watch is telling you to stand up, I encourage you to meet other people. Just have these two questions. You don't need to share out in case that, that may produce some anxiety for folks. But what are the benefits of disaggregated data and labeling or categorizing students in this way? And what are some challenges that you may experience and you're welcome to talk about in your role specifically, or in your department, or just generally at UCSD? I'll give you about 5-10 minutes. Yes. Oh, yes. And go back. Mm-hmm. Discuss. All right, let's slowly start wrapping up our conversations. All right. Well, I hope you all were able to have some good conversations. So now we'll get into the numbers, the exciting stuff. Get ready. All right, so this is we'll go through undergrad and graduate student data. And as I previously mentioned, students can self-identify with more than one race or ethnicity on their application when they apply to the UC system. So so the graphs or the charts that we have do count students multiple times if they did select, more than one category. So I do just want to name that. So I got this from the UCOP website. So if you were to, I know it's hard to see the exact numbers here, but if you were to go to the UCOP website, these numbers would not equal the exact number of enrollment. So I just want to put that out there that the numbers will be a bit off because some students are counted multiple times in this data set. So there were 32,960 domestic undergraduate students in fall of 2021. Holy bananas. And it just keeps going up, right? And the total number of Asian American students in the fall of 2021 was 13,408. So that's the individual number. So students were not counted twice or multiple times in that number. So I apologize if it's hard to see. So we've got Chinese American, Vietnamese American, Filipinx American, Indian American, Korean American, Taiwanese American, Japanese American, other Asian American, Pakistani American, Cambodian American, Indonesian American, Thai American, Bangladeshi American, Laotian American, Malaysian American, Sri Lankan American, and Hmong American. So our Chinese American students, we had 4,568 Chinese American students, and we had 25 Hmong American students last fall, or that enrolled in the fall. So the total number of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander students was 235. So Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander, Chamorro, Samoan, Fijian, and Tongan. The next graph is going to be a little bit harder to read. All right, so the total number of SWANA identified students was 1,813. So we got from your left to right, Iranian American, Armenian American, Iraqi American, Lebanese American, Israeli American, Afghan American, Egyptian American, Syrian American, Palestinian American, Turkish American, Chaldean American, Jordanian American, Moroccan American, Somali American, Kurdish American, Sudanese American, Algerian American, Azerbaijani American, Georgian American, other Southwest Asian American, Tunisian American, other North African American, Berber American, Libyan American, Circassian American, Emirati American, Bahraini American, Kuwaiti American, Omani American, Djiboutian American, and Mauritanian American. So I know because of how it's in increments of 100, towards the end it looks like we have 0 students, but we did have one Djiboutian and one Mauritanian, and one Bahraini American and one Kuwaiti American student last fall that enrolled at UCSD. All right, so here we've got our domestic graduate students. So we had a total of 5,467 domestic graduate students in total. And graduate students may have more limited set of options on their application depending on the particular program and campus or UC campus that they apply to. So as you'll see in the next few slides, there are fewer subgroups in the charts than there were for the undergraduate student application. So I'm just going to read it in case that's helpful for folks. So we got Chinese, Asian, Indian, Vietnamese, Filipino, Korean, Japanese, other Asian, Taiwanese, Cambodian, Indonesian, East Indian, Sri Lankan, Bangladeshi, Malaysian, Pakistani, Thai, and Hmong. All right, and then total number of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander grad students was 32. And then we got Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander, Guamanian, Chamorro, Samoan, Hawaii, other Pacific Islander. And the total number of our SWANA graduate students was 339. And as you can see, the subgroups are different than what was in our undergraduate student application. So we have white Middle Eastern, white North African, Iranian, Iraqi, Egyptian, Syrian, Armenian, Lebanese, Palestinian, Assyrian/Chaldean, Israeli, Jordanian, Afghan, Turkish, Algerian, Azerbaijani, other North African, other Southwest Asian, Somali, and Sudanese. All right, so again, in your groups, was there anything in these data sets that was surprising or not surprising to you? And were there, I know some staff and faculty here, some may only have direct experience working with undergraduate students, and some may only have experience working with graduate students, but in your personal experiences on this campus, are there any similarities or differences that you have noticed amongst the experiences of our undergraduate and graduate students? So I'll give you about 5-10 minutes to have that conversation. I encourage you to maybe have these discussion questions with maybe somebody else that you haven't interacted with, or somebody at a different table. Would it be helpful to go through the charts again? I mean, there were a lot. There's a lot of things, right? So, okay. This one? Sorry, can you repeat the question? Like, for how long have we had these options? Is that, yeah, since the fall 2013 application, UC application. So before that, it was Middle Eastern and North African students were subgroups under the white Caucasian category. Oh. Was that a question? Sorry. Yeah. I think it was, for these are domestic students, so students who are citizens or maybe permanent residents. And so I think this was when the proposal from the students at Berkeley was created, it was to, these were some of the subgroups that they had advocated for. Yeah, and so I know this is different from the...
What about the actually international students?
I'm sorry?
What about the actual international students, if you're saying these are the American students?
So these data sets are specifically for our domestic students. Yeah. So I think, I know Dulce went over some of the international student data yesterday, but yeah, because today is the domestic track, just covering specifically the domestic student data. Sorry about that confusion. Yes.
A topic that we had at our table, and I should disclaimer I worked on this project of getting some of this exposed within EDI. But part of what we were talking about at our table was that these questions of when is there going to be an American after the label, when is there not going to be one, all of these are kind of implementation details that are invisible and behind the scenes, and often a committee or a combination of an IT person and someone who is charged with the work group. And so I just think it's valuable to keep in mind that the kind of discussion and interaction we're doing today matters not just if you work with students, but if you touch the university in any way.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. Yeah, because I think, as we, just going back to this slide, even though these are the subcategories that may be on the UC application, I think some students would argue that maybe even though they have lived here their whole life, maybe they don't identify themselves like as an Iranian American, even though maybe they were born here, maybe their parents were born here, what have you. And there's a lot of complexity to that, right, of how do students define like what it means to be an American, and what are their experiences that lead to them feeling like they belong or don't belong, and if their experiences have been that they don't belong, like would they really identify with these categories that are on the application? Yeah.
Can you explain again why the graduate categories are different than the undergraduate?
Yeah, because I think when students apply as graduate students, they apply to different individual programs. So it's up to the program to figure out what their like racial and ethnic subcategories are going to be. Whereas at UC for undergrad, it's the same across all UC systems, versus where depending on the UC campus, depending on the program that you're applying to, the application is very dependent on that school of medicine, for example, or whatnot. Does that answer your question? Yeah, is there a move to change that? Is that what you're
to standardize?
Yeah, that I do not know, but I think that is a good thing I think that is something worth advocating for.
I think we're asking the same question over at this table, and I'm in graduate education and postdoctoral affairs. So, from my understanding, the application that is not inclusive of the School of Medicine or School of Pharmacy, which really run their own applications, but the one for all other programs on our campus is a campus decision about how we're choosing the categories. But we are reporting to UCOP, which I believe we choose our categories based on what we're going to need to report back to UCOP. So I think my question is why would UCOP not want to align undergrad and grad categories? So I think those are questions we'll definitely want to be asking, and I'm happy to continue looking at that. And my colleague Angeline, something we should look at. Maybe, I don't know if you have other insights on that. Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I cannot see.
Hi, my name's Elena Aliaga, and I have a little bit of an off-topic question from the data that you presented. I wanted to ask, possibly if this was talked about yesterday too, if you have numbers on undocumented students that identify as APIMED or SWANA?
Yeah, I was trying to look for the undocumented student data. I think when it comes, it wasn't something I was able to find. I know on the undocumented student services website, it gives general, maybe the top countries that our undocumented students are from. I think part of that may be just undocumented student information is just more sensitive, so I think it's less accessible, because this is just public information that you can pull from the UCOP website. Yeah. I appreciate this larger conversation. I know there's a lot of people from different offices, and I appreciate the conversation and the different insight that folks are able to contribute.
Sorry, since we're doing these
No
broader
apologies
conversation, I'll ask
necessary.
one
No
more
apologies.
that actually is a carryover a little bit from our previous group conversation, which was, and it comes to mind even more looking at this data, is when the students select, do they see American after the ethnic group, or do they just see the ethnicity without American?
Yeah, I
Right?
believe this is this is pulled, and so this is how it shows up on the application.
Okay, because one thing we were noticing on the previously on the when you showed all the groups, there, for instance, there was Vietnamese American, but then there was just Thai, and there wasn't an option for Thai American.
Right.
And so we're just curious, how that might impact how students would select as well. But I don't know if that's connected to what the students see when they're selecting. but I just wanted to, or like here, right, you have American after each thing here, but is that what they see on the selection, or do they see, yeah.
Yeah, I believe this is what they would see because it's, and then, because on the UCOP website, this is just pulled directly from the application. So if you even notice here, it says Filipinx American, but on the graduate student side, it just says Filipino. So does that, right? And so no, I think that's a good point of like how, whether it's Thai/Thai American, or if it just says Thai or just says Thai American, how would that influence a student's decision of whether or not they're going to check or, mark that box on their application? That's not an answer I have for you today. But I appreciate you bringing up that point. Anything else? All right. Feel free to interrupt. I'm all, if anything does come up moving forward. All right, so we're gonna go into some of the survey responses that I mentioned at the beginning. So the APIMEDA Programs and Services Office distributed a survey to APIMEDA students towards the end of spring quarter. And one of the questions on that survey was, what is one thing we could do to make your experience at UC San Diego better? And so I have a few slides here. I wanna make sure, I don't know how well people can see this, I wanna make sure I read it. So one student said, having more organizations on campus for North African and Middle Eastern, it's pretty difficult to find your group of people, and maybe there should be an organization that brings these groups of people together so they don't feel like they're the only ones with that background on campus. Another student said, a push to include more Middle Eastern studies courses in the DEI requirement would dispel a lot of narratives that affect Middle Eastern students on campus on a daily basis. An effort to include us more in the conversation in general would be very helpful. Another student said having faculty that actually represents the students. Another student said more ethnic food in the dining halls. My quality of life has been affected as a result of the jarring dietary changes. One student said that at a first glance, APIMEDA seems so general because it encompasses so many different identities. I'm all for being inclusive and building connections, but I feel like encompassing all these identities with very unique experiences does a disservice to DESI, Middle Eastern, East Asian, and Southeast Asian identities. Unique identities deserve unique organizations to prevent erasure and assimilation of culture. Another student said, recognizing other identities and being intentional of how they are incorporated into things like programming. For example, multiracial identity, transracial adoptees, etc. My last response that I have on here says, what student said, providing a physical space for the Office of APIMEDA Programs and Services would make my experience at UC San Diego better. As someone that is figuring out where I can go on campus that feels safe and that I can go to for support, it would change my experience being able to visit a physical space that is dedicated to supporting the APIMEDA community and students. They have been instrumental in my retention and connection to folks this past year, and I think that knowing there's a space where I could visit staff and meet students would be greatly helpful. So I just want to kind of briefly summarize some of the things that were said and also identify some challenges that we have seen in our work with APIMED students. And so I think one of the things that came up is feelings of invisibility. Staff and faculty don't look like you, and for Middle Eastern students, it's hard to find others of their community, and so they may feel invisible on this campus. And even with DEI courses, even though that is now a requirement of our students, how many of those courses go through or talk about the experiences of our Middle Eastern students so that we could better understand their histories and the things that they may be experiencing in greater society and on our campus. And I think the other thing with invisibility, for me as a Korean American, being a student at this institution, I remember as a student realizing for the first time in my life, like there were so many students who looked like me, and how comforting that was. And yet, despite the large number of API student or Asian American students, I still felt invisible because we were not always seen or considered a minoritized group on this campus or an underrepresented group solely because there were a large number of students. And so that didn't take into consideration the marginalized experiences of Asian American students on this campus and, outside of campus. And I think with these feelings of invisibility also come with that, a lack of understanding of these experiences. And without understanding the experiences, and as Provost Swain mentioned yesterday, being fluent in the struggles, how do we support our students? The other thing I'd put on here, and I mentioned this in one of the sessions I attended yesterday, was holidays and observances that conflict with the academic calendar, or the dominant calendar. Last quarter, spring quarter, a student emailed me and our dean because he was observing Ramadan and fasting from dawn to sunset, and obviously this affected his ability to focus and study, and he asked his professor for an accommodation to be able to take his midterm on a different day, and the professor's response was no, hence why my dean and I received that email. And part of the student's email to us was saying, like, why are my holidays, or what I observe, less valid than students who celebrate Christmas when our academic calendar revolves around those Christian holidays? And one of the things that came out of the session that we were at yesterday is that there is a policy that to make reasonable efforts to accommodate students who the wording with the academic senate is with efforts to accommodate students having bona fide religious conflicts with scheduled examinations. But for some students, they may not know that this policy is in place. For final examinations, they have to request an accommodation by the end of week 2. For other examinations, the request must be submitted to the instructor as soon as they know when those other scheduled exams are. And I'm reading this verbatim. If a conflict with the student's religious beliefs does exist, the instructor will attempt to provide an alternative, equitable examination, which does not create undue hardship for the instructor or for the other students in the class. And so when we were talking about this in one of our sessions yesterday, we also learned that we can provide updated language or suggestions for new language to the academic senate when it comes to policies like this. So if I know that's something that my dean mentioned that she was working on, and so if there are other policies that impact our students, but maybe they're not worded in the most student-centered way, apparently there is an avenue to give feedback. So if that is something that you all come across, I encourage you to provide feedback, because I recognize that some of these policies that are in place at our institution don't always benefit, or not always in the best interest of our students, or may not always be as student-centered as they could be. And then the next one was the model minority myth, which came up today, and I think came up yesterday also. But the model minority myth is just this, in very basic terms, this misconception that students of Asian American and Pacific Islander descent do well academically and they don't need additional support. And I think that continues to treat the students as a monolith, and it definitely takes away from some, when you lump everyone together and just say, like, everyone's doing fine and therefore they don't need any additional support or any additional services. And with this model minority myth, I think there are definitely students on our campus who uphold that and feel a lot of pressure to uphold it, to get straight A's, to do well academically in all their classes, and at the expense of their mental health and physical health at times. And so I think it is important to recognize that this, even though it's called the myth, that it is something that is very prevalent in how maybe students show up or how they may perceive themselves, and also when it comes to staff and faculty, how they may perceive how our students are doing. And then lastly, with mental health stigmas, I think we have made a lot of strides on this campus and nationally to destigmatize the need for mental health support. I think this is still something that is very much stigmatized in the APIMED community. And so how can we, and I think there are definitely things that, more work that we can do in order to make sure that the students who need the mental health support get the support and the help that they need before, in a way that helps them, how do I say this? that is also takes into consideration maybe some of those like cultural components, like whether it's shame or whether it's this fear or hesitation to ask for help. I think a lot of those things are very much reinforced within those communities. And so I think it's important to take that into consideration when we're trying to help these students. How do we do that in a way and also be sensitive and mindful of the collective messages that they may have grown up with? All right, so this is the last question. So having seen the responses for students and having gone through some challenges and also having witnessed some of the challenges that our APIMED students face, what can you as an individual or from your office or your unit do to support our APIMED students? Maybe even one thing. Oh, what? Sorry. Oh, was that not for me? Okay, cool. I don't know if we want to, let's check on time. If we, maybe like 2-3 minutes to share in your small groups, and then if anybody is feeling comfortable and brave to share out with a large group, I think it is important to kind of share what our ideas are, or things that we're already doing, and if there are ways that we can either collaborate, or if there are things that we can implement in our respective offices. I think it is important to know what other people are already doing or planning to do. So if we take like maybe 3-ish minutes, just share in your small groups, and then we'll have an opportunity for folks to share out. Cool. Go chat. to wrap up our conversations. All right, I want to make sure folks have enough time between this presentation and the breakout sessions we've got coming up. Does anybody want to share what you talked about at your tables, like maybe some of the work that you are doing individually or with your office, or work that you are hoping to do or planning to do? Maybe are there ways for collaboration or ways that we can support you? Yes, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah. I work at iHouse. So we were talking a lot about sort of globally and culturally oriented programming. And I think that one thing that we were talking about to be mindful of when creating programming for groups that you yourself don't belong to or don't identify as is that you need to be really careful about actually finding campus partners and students to connect with so that you aren't really like providing content or a program or voice for students who may have their own needs expressed or ideas of what they want programming to look like. So really having that proactive like goodwill and like connection building first to find partners and find out what is wanted so that you're building an inclusive platform and not just imagining programming for someone else. Even with a small group of student assistants, you're not always going to have a perfect bank of knowledge or expertise on what an inclusive and authentic program looks like. So just finding those partners and making sure that you're getting the perspective of students you may not have at the front of mind early on in the process before you're, setting dates and naming programs and everything like that.
Thank you.
A thought that came to my mind just now, I didn't get to share with my group, but like as staff and faculty, like how do we recruit more folks that look like this population that's seeking that? Who do we reach out to in the community to get that type of talent here on campus? Because we do need a lot of staff support to support those students that maybe 25. It's kind of weird, right? Like you don't think that we need that, but we really do. We need that representation. And when they come here as a staff member or a faculty member, how do we retain them and make them happy too? Because I think it's their experience as well at UCSD and how they project it to the students. So those are my thoughts.
Hi. So I have a question. I saw the demographics of the participants yesterday, and I noticed that there was some faculty in those demographics. How many faculty are there here today? 3 of us, I think. Okay. So this is something that I've worried about for a long, long time, since when I was provost of Muir and since then, and that is that there is a divide between sort of the student affairs side of the house and the academic side of the house. And we don't really have a forum that brings faculty into these conversations as robustly as I think we should. And the situation that you just discussed with respect to Ramadan and the student looking for an exam, an alternative exam, I was actually involved in that. I reached out to the department and I got a lot of pushback because we don't, first of all, the policy is not clear enough, it's vague enough that it really allows faculty to still do whatever they want. But still, we haven't created a culture where I think we're being student-centered on the academic side of the house. I think we're getting better, but we're a long way off. And as long as the conversations don't engage faculty, I'm not sure we're going to get there. So, and the faculty who are here are faculty who are very student-centered already. So, and with the pandemic, faculty have been pushed very, very far and are particularly sensitive to being asked to do extra things because they feel they've worked very hard, which they have, and we have to acknowledge that. But the students are also in this situation. So I don't know, it's kind of a mess, but I think we need to figure out how to address this.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I appreciate you adding that, I guess, complexity to the conversation of, and with these policies, like for good and for bad, right? It's written vaguely for those, I guess, like loopholes, and in good ways and sometimes in ways that don't necessarily serve our students. So how do we, I don't know if you have any, in your experience, advice as to how we can engage in those conversations with faculty that we make. Thank you.
I have a comment. Hey, DJ, pump me up. No. So I have a comment in alignment with this gentleman's comment, is because I taught for 5 years at Cal State San Marcos, and one of the things is that yes, usually the faculty that are already student-centered are the ones that are coming to the table with this. What we need to do is really encourage or invite the academic senate to create that what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like that space of letting the faculty have the freedom to make those accommodations for students and create that space of like, yes, let's do this for the students, because I mean, ultimately that's what we're all here for. Like, I couldn't see us sitting around teaching each other.
One last comment. It got real quiet in here. All right, that's okay. I'll let you off the hook. All right, so I just want to wrap us up with this last question. As you move through the day, if you go to the different sessions, just continue to keep this question in mind of like, what do I need to do or what do I need to learn in order to better support our APIMED students? And what can we collectively do to ensure that we are all engaging in this work? Because I think oftentimes, you know, we're here, then when we leave here, this work tends to fall to the same people. It tends to fall to APIMED programs and services. It may fall to Cross Cultural Center. It may fall to the staff and faculty who identify with this community. But understanding our students' experiences, becoming, again, fluent in their struggles, and doing the work to support them is a collective effort that we must all intentionally and actively choose to engage and participate in. So I ask you to keep this question in mind as you go through the rest of the day. And yeah, thank you so much. That's the end of our session.